Klong Prem. The name is whispered with a mixture of fear and resignation across Thailand. To the outside world, it is an anonymous speck on a map, a byword for harsh justice. But to the thousands of men huddled within its walls, it is not a place, it is a condition. A sickness of the soul that eats away at the days, the weeks, the years, until the memory of who you once were becomes a distant dream, perhaps someone else's dream. The air inside is heavy, thick with the sweat of 800 men. Per building, with the smell of cheap disinfectant and stagnant despair. The humid Bangkok heat clings to the skin like a shroud, a constant suffocating reminder that there is no escape. In this universe of concrete and rust, there lived a man named Niran, or rather what was left of him. At 32, he had already been in Klong Prem for 8 years, 8 years of a 50-year sentence, an eternity so vast that the mind refuses to comprehend it. The 24-year-old who had walked through those gates, his body vibrating with blind rage and his heart heavy with an impulsive and tragic crime, was no more. That Niran had slowly disintegrated under the crushing weight of routine. What was left was an automaton, a ghost who moved through the corridors with silent efficiency, whose eyes had learned not to see so as not to feel. The violence that had brought him here had faded, replaced by something much worse, a vacuum. A hollow silence that filled his chest where once there had been passion, anger, and regret. His days were a carbon copy of the previous ones, waking up before the sun, the count, the tasteless food, the long hours of work in the prison workshop, the deafening noise, the nightly count, the darkness of the overcrowded cell. The dreams filled with nothing. He was a cog in the machine, a body that took up space, a number on a list. It was in this state of hibernation of the soul that he first noticed the sound. It was a sound different from the usual chaos of the prison. A rhythmic, guttural sound. The sound of thuds, of gasps for breath, of orders shouted with an authority that was not that of the guards. From the exercise yard of Block 5 came the sound of Muay Thai, the program Prison Fight. He began to watch from the barred window of his workshop. He saw men he knew by sight, murderers, drug dealers, thieves, moving with a brutal grace, a fierce discipline that contrasted sharply with the lethargy of the rest of the prison. Their bodies, once limp with inactivity or tense with paranoia, were becoming weapons. Their faces, once masks of boredom or aggression, were intent, alive. At first, Niran felt contempt. To him, it was a circus, a performance for the guards, for the bureaucrats of the Department of Corrections, and occasionally for the curious foreigners who came to watch the exotic animals fight in their cages. He listened to their conversations. They do it to reduce their sentence, they said. A year or two off a 50-year sentence, a drop in the ocean of his sentence. Others fight for the money, they said, a few hundred baht sent to a family that had, for the most part, forgotten them. Niran wanted none of that. Freedom was a concept as abstract as the stars he could no longer see at night, and his family. He had severed those ties the day the door to his first cell closed. But he kept watching, day after day. He watched the ring hierarchy form. He saw the respect in the eyes of the other inmates when a fighter walked by. It wasn't fear. It was something different. It was the recognition of a strength that came not from random brutality, but from self-imposed discipline. These men were building something within themselves, while everything else around them was crumbling. The change in Niran was not a flash in the pan, but a slow tide. It began with a detail, as it always does. An elderly inmate, the unofficial librarian of the block, received a letter. Niran was close enough to see the paper tremble in the old man's hands. The man read it, folded the paper with painful precision, and then turned to the wall, his body shaking with silent, racking sobs. His wife was dead. The only line connecting him to the outside world had been severed. That night the old man seemed to have shrunk, his spirit finally broken. Niran saw it and felt the first tremor of his own inner void. Later, as he washed his face under a dripping tap, he stared at his reflection in the worn surface of a polished metal mirror. He saw the lines on his face, the pallor of his skin, the total absence of light in his eyes. He did not recognize this man. It was the face of a stranger, a hollow face, haunted not by ghosts, but by their absence. The truth hit him with the force of a physical blow. The old man's pain was terrible, but at least he felt something. His pain was a proof of his love, a proof of his life. And he, Niran, he felt nothing. His apathy was not a defense, it was the end. That night, the decision was solidified. It wasn't an act of hope, it was an act of desperation. A man throwing himself off a cliff, not to fly, but to feel the wind against his face one last time. The next day, his heart hammering in his chest for the first time in years, he walked to the training yard and asked to sign up. The trainer, a former champion with a face like a map of past battles, looked at him, saw the emptiness in his eyes, and for some reason nodded. Niran didn't want to fight to reduce his sentence. He wanted to fight to see if he still bled. The training was a baptism of fire. His body, softened by years of inactivity, protested with an agony he could barely bear. The first few days were a blur of muscle pain, of burning lungs, of humiliation at being unable to complete the most basic exercises. Running in the blazing sun of the courtyard felt like endless torture. The forced stretches seemed to break his bones. Every order from the coach, Saishon, was a test of his newfound will. Several times he thought of giving up, of returning to the numbing safety of his emptiness, but he persisted, driven by the memory of that face in the mirror. And slowly, something began to change. Physical pain, once an enemy, became a constant companion, a barometer of his effort. Every aching muscle, every scratch, every bruise that blossomed on his skin was proof. Proof that he was there, that his body was his, that he could feel. He began to focus on the pain, to welcome it. It was real, and everything that was real took him away from the ghost he had been. Coach Saishon was a man of few words, but with eyes that saw everything. He saw Niran's transformation. He saw that the prisoner did not train with the arrogance of someone who wanted to prove something to others, nor with the eagerness of someone who sought freedom. He trained with the quiet fury of a man at war with himself. One day, as Niran was practicing punches on a heavy, patched-up bag, Saishon stopped. Him. "You hit with anger," he said, his voice hoarse. "Anger tires you, it blinds you. Muay Thai is not about anger, boy, it's about control. You don't control the bag, you control your body, you don't destroy your opponent, you read him, you understand him, and then you overcome him. This is not about breaking, it's about building, you understand?" Niran didn't answer, just nodded, panting. But the words echoed in him. Build. It was the first time he had heard that word associated with anything. Inside Klong Prem, he began to train differently. He began to focus on technique, on breathing, on rhythm. Anger gave way to concentration. Chaos gave way to clarity. He was learning a new language, a language spoken with fists, elbows, knees, and feet. A language that came from centuries of tradition, from the blood of his people. And as he learned it, he began to feel a trace of something he thought he had lost forever: pride. His first test came months later. An internal dispute, a way for the guards to resolve tensions in the block without getting their hands dirty. Niran's opponent was a bigger, stronger man, known for his aggression. In the moments before the fight, the old fear returned. The fear not of getting hit, but of failing, of being sucked back into the void. But when the guard gave the signal to begin, an unexpected calm came over him. The noise of the other inmates screaming faded. The presence of the guards became irrelevant. The world shrank to the 4x4-meter space of the makeshift ring. It was just him and the other man. He moved not by instinct but with intention. He absorbed the first few strikes, reading his opponent's rhythm. He saw the openings. He remembered Saishon's words. Control, clarity. And then he counterattacked. The fight didn't last long. Victory was clear. When his hand was raised by the guard, he heard the roar of approval from the other inmates. But the real victory was internal, the silence in his mind. In that moment of pure, exhausting presence, he was not the killer, the prisoner, number 817. He was Niran, the fighter. And for the first time, he felt worthy of his own name. A year passed, a year of relentless training. Niran's body had changed. He was leaner, stronger, covered in a network of muscles and scars. But the biggest change was invisible. The blankness in his eyes had been replaced by a cold, focused flame. He had become one of the best fighters on the show. And then the news came. He had been chosen to headline the next prison fight. His fight would be against an amateur champion from France. The news hit him in a strange way. There was no elation. There was no fear, just a sense of inevitability, as if the entire last year had been preparing him for this moment. The preparation for the fight was unlike anything he had ever experienced. He was given better food, a rare privilege. He had more time to train, isolated from the others. The system that had for so long treated him like an animal now treated him like a valuable asset, a champion to be displayed. While Niran spent his days in focused isolation, the French fighter was rumored to be exploring the markets and temples of Bangkok. For him, fighting in a prison was an exotic adventure, an incredible story to tell his friends in Paris, a boost to his popularity. He had no idea what awaited him in the ring. He did not know that he would be fighting not a prisoner, but a man fighting for his very soul. On the day of the event, the prison was unrecognizable. An arena was set up in the main courtyard. Television cameras, foreign journalists, high-ranking officials. The atmosphere was like a macabre festival. Niran walked toward the ring, feeling the eyes of hundreds of inmates on him. They were looks of envy, of hope, of curiosity. He was one of them, and for one night he would fight for them all. As the bell rang, beginning the first round, the outside world disappeared once more. The Frenchman was fast, skillful, confident. His early strikes forced Niran back. The Niran of a year ago would have been overwhelmed, his flame extinguished by superior skill. But the Niran of now was different. He absorbed the pressure, his body a fortress, his mind an oasis of calm. He was fighting an opponent, but the real battle was within. By the second round, he had found his rhythm. He remembered Saichon. Let him come, let him show his strength, and when he is more confident, show him your soul. Niran began to counterattack. His blows were heavier, loaded not only with the strength of his muscles but with the weight of his 8 years of silence. He landed a powerful kick to the Frenchman's body and heard the air rush out of his opponent's lungs. The foreigner's confidence wavered. For the first time, he saw something in Niran's eyes that was not fear. It was something much older and more dangerous. The third and final round was a war of exhaustion. Both men were at their limit. Every movement was a monumental effort. Niran's mind screamed at him to stop, to accept the pain and fall. It was the voice of the ghost, the voice of the void, trying to claim him. But he silenced it with the image in the mirror, the hollow face, the dead eyes. He would not go back there. He unleashed one last combination, a fury of knees and elbows, driving the Frenchman against the ropes as the bell sounded, ending the fight. He could barely stand. The outcome didn't matter. He had survived. He had fought. He had refused to break. Hours later, the makeshift arena was gone. The cameras were gone. Klong Prem was just a prison again. Niran lay on his bed in the familiar darkness of his cell. Every inch of his body was a symphony of pain. His face was swollen, his body covered in bruises. He closed his eyes and for the first time he saw nothing. He saw the ring, felt the impact of the blows, heard the sound of his own breathing, and he smiled. A smile that didn't reach his bruised lips, but filled his entire being. The judge had raised the Frenchman's hand that night, a political decision to avoid offending the guests. But Niran knew the truth. Victory had never been in the judge's hands. He might have been condemned to spend the rest of his adult life within these walls. But the ghost inside him had been defeated. The sentence of apathy had been lifted, and as he felt the pain throb through his body, Niran knew with absolute certainty that finally, after so long, he was undeniably alive.